Welcome to Defying the Odds podcast, the podcast where grit, resilience, and drive take center stage. I am Leonovsky, political refugee from the Soviet Union, and now professor of entrepreneurship.
I'm Victor Salcida, a formerly incarcerated individual turned software engineer and social entrepreneur on a mission to empower justice-impacted individuals through technology, education, and systemic change.
In 2018, I was fortunate to have Victor as one of my students while he was incarcerated. Fast forward, we're both free to find opportunities, challenge stereotypes as business partners, community leaders, and co-anchors of this life-changing podcast, where we dive deep into powerful conversations with guests who have shattered their own barriers and defied their own odds.
On each episode, we're here to bring you not just stories, but strategies, real tools to help you take on challenges in life, business, and beyond.
So tune in, be inspired, and get ready to defy your own odds.
This is Defying the Odds podcast, where no challenge is too great to conquer.
Let's go. What's up?
What's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. This is one of a kind. This is the live taping, or live as in we are in the same room. Look,
Let's go.
Touch. That's right. Victor and I live in across the country. I'm in Seattle, and he's now in Texas, right? So it's such a unique opportunity for us to actually get together. What a unique opportunity. So I wanted to take this opportunity to interview Victor.
Let's do it.
Yeah, and you can interview me, because that way our guests can
learn a little more, right?
Learn a little more. That's
For
right.
Sure.
So first of all, I'm going to introduce you. So Victor is an entrepreneur, a community leader, a formerly incarcerated individual who is on a mission to change the way our system treats and ultimately supports those who are coming out of the criminal justice system. And as you heard in the introductions, I've met him in 2018 when he joined my program at Monroe Correctional Complex. And since then, he's just been accelerating every year that I've seen him. So this gives me an opportunity to really dive deep into why and how you do it. So both me and the audience can actually learn.
For sure.
So I'll ask you the question I ask every guest on our show. How do you define the odds?
How I define the odds, Leo. And yeah, first of all, great to be here in person. This feels awesome. But how I define the odds is overcoming something that is challenging to overcome and you didn't give up on, right? Like you continue to push forth in those efforts, because a lot of us could get stuck and complacent in just, the status quo of not trying to accelerate. But you really have to have the grit. I think we hear it time and time again, is just the mindset, right? That mindset of being able to defy those odds. But I think a lot of it has, just that perseverance to get through whatever that sticking point is. It could be a 10-year experience. It could be shedding off, 20 pounds off your weight, whatever you consider to be defying the odds. It tends to be a theme that comes behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me about your experiences of defying the odds. I know the first one that absolutely comes to mind. So talk about your journey through prison.
I'll talk about my journey through prison, but I think it's important for the listeners to know is just like how I even got to prison in the first place and how I had to defy the odds leading up to there.
Yeah, talk to us.
So I think, originally I was born in California, Santa Ana, Orange County, and grew up with both my dad and mom till about 5 years old, and they started having their own personal, relationship issues and caused a split at a relatively young age for me. And even just being split, I stayed with my mom. My dad ended up moving up to Washington to kind of be with his family. But I had to define the odds there. That was a life defying moment where it's like, okay, how do I react to this situation? And I was so young at the time. It was like, how do I know how to react to that situation? How do I defy the odds at, that young of an age? So that honestly had a lot of impact. Here I was, going through from 5 to 10 years old, I believe it was, without, a consistent father figure, and having to kind of figure out life on my own with my mom. It was something that became normal for me. I had to, become a I was the oldest brother. I had to become a big brother and kind of, a role model for my little brother, Reyes, and had to defy the odds in so many ways there. There's obviously, the gang culture and all of that stuff that kind of influenced me early on in those younger years, that I wanted to kind of be a part of. And even going through like those situations, being, 10 years old, getting shot at, from people in the neighborhood, is just, you have to defy the odds in those moments. And just want to kind of share with the listeners kind of the environment and upbringing that, I had to face even just as a 10-year-old boy. I think that had a lot of influence on how my life ended up, playing out years later.
What are some of the things that kind of stand out to you from that really formative time, having experienced these things that most listeners, I'm assuming, have never experienced? I certainly have never been shot at, but and I was lucky enough to have my parents there during my formative years. So what was happening for you? What were the lessons that you were learning then that kind of shaped your life going forward?
For me, I think I had to grow up just really fast, like especially with the mom. Like when we did split, my mom, she didn't take the split well at all. She went through like a whole like drug addiction and going through that whole phase. So a lot of the times I just had to grow up really fast. I had to try to figure things out on my own. A lot of the people that I could lean on were like my older homeboys, and these were like people that I looked up to at the time. And those were my role models in a sense, right? Like I had to learn from them because I didn't have, a dad at home to show me otherwise. I didn't have a mom that was on the straight and narrow. She was on these other paths. So I did have to kind of just like figure out and explore, like, what it takes to be, a man or growing into a man. What does life look like? I was still trying to figure it out. You don't know nothing at 10 years old. And for me to have to figure it out at that young, I think it kind of just put the pressure. And it was really like, I think a lot of that had, ultimately made me who I am today. Is just like those moments back then. How did I deal with them? How did I deal with, somebody getting in the shot in the car, in the car with me, seeing them, drop them at their family's house while they're shot, still alive, and just like, here, take this guy to the hospital. Just like those types of experience you wouldn't want, a 10-year-old to go through. And my grandma definitely didn't like it. She knew that something had to change. And that's when she reached out to my father and was like, look, they're not going to do too good down here. Let's try to move them out to Washington and see what happens there.
Great. So tell us what happened.
So yeah, we ended up going to Washington, and this honestly was kind of weird to me. I grew to love my mom, even though, she went through all of her, challenges. I grew to love her, and, being stripped away from her, we literally had like, I think a day's notice, if that. We didn't even get to say bye to our friends or anything. They're just like, oh, you're going on a plane to Washington to go live with your dad. And we're just like, okay. Me and my brother didn't really know how to make sense of it all at the time. We end up going to, Washington, and this is land essentially unknown to us, right? Like we were able to, mom, she let us do what we want. Dad had a lot more structure. He was a lot more strict on how he operated. He had 2 kids already, a family of his own. So it was a little different for us kind of getting into it. And for me, I felt like the only thing that was right for me to do was rebel, because I didn't want to be in that situation. I was, a 10-year-old that wanted to be back with my mom. I didn't know why I was being stripped away from, from my family.
Everything that you knew.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you had this formative experience when you were 5 with your family stripping out and losing your dad. as a role model and as a stabilizing force in your life. And then you were moved, ripped apart. 5 years later, you were moved apart again, moved away, this time ripped apart from your mom, and come to live here. And the thing that happened for you is like you needed to rebel. That's what you learned. You learned that you need to cut ties and
Right.
be self-sufficient.
Right.
So what happened then?
Yeah, so I was just trying to find myself. I was a young kid. I think I was just finishing up elementary, going into junior high. And, that's also just like a life defining moment there. I'm trying to I find my identity, how I fit in with all these other kids that were normal and weren't going through all these challenges. Was definitely like something that I had to experience coming up, but yeah, just trying to figure out like how I fitted in. And I think the ultimate goal for the reason why my grandma um, wanted to move us up to Washington with our family was obviously like hopes of a better life to get us away from the gang lifestyle and all that stuff. But somehow, I ended up finding it out in the streets of Washington. I wasn't able to escape it. And that's kind of what I was attracted to because of my California roots. I was like, okay, that's something that I know. Let me see where that is here, because it felt comfortable.
So you actually sought it out,
Right.
because it was something that these were your role models. This is what gave you stability on the streets in California.
For sure. That felt like my family.
Yeah, it felt like the family, right? And I think it's really important to reflect that very often, because your story is very common inside the prison, where it's who we surround ourselves with. We become who we surround ourselves with. That for better or worse, right?
For sure.
So fast forward. So what happened then?
Yeah, so I ended up getting involved with the wrong crowds. Eventually got jumped into a gang at 15 years old, and yeah, just trying to be a part of something. I knew that this was something that I loved at the time. I spent years just kind of living the culture and the lifestyle, and I was like, what the heck. I was hanging out with all the homeboys, and they're just kind of like, yeah, get in our gang. And eventually, yeah, just became just a lifestyle. I started getting involved with all of the things that go along with it, selling drugs, breaking into houses, all of the women, and like all of that stuff that came along with it. But eventually all of that's going to run out. I think my first time in the juvenile facility, I think I was like 13 years old for shooting off a gun in the air, and that experience wasn't scary for me or anything, because all of my homeboys were inside of the institution as well. It's just more of like a family, like get together. Yeah,
it was like a
reunion,
family reunion.
Exactly. So I'm just seeing a lot of my homeboys that I haven't seen in the streets for a while. I'm like, oh, this is where you guys are hanging out, So it did feel more like home. It wasn't scary. And I remember that first drive home, my dad was taking me home. He told me the same thing that you just mentioned. He's like, look, son, like, you are who you hang around with. If you hang around with a jailbird, you're going to be a jailbird. If you hang out with, successful business owners, you're going to be a successful business owner. But I was way too young at that time to understand. I was a 13-year-old boy, thought I had it all figured out to understand just, what how important that was. So I had a gun at the time, and my dad knew I still had the gun. I ended
13-year-old with a gun.
Yeah, I ended up they didn't take the gun from me when I got arrested for it. They ended up releasing me because they couldn't find the gun, but I hid the gun and I still had it when I got out. So I wasn't in a better situation when I got out. Now I was just like, oh, they can't catch me with guns. So I felt more like I was invincible, and just allowed me to continue on that path.
So the first time you went in, you didn't learn much, right? And it just reinforced some of your negative beliefs. And so what happened then? Because at this point, if I were to look at you from the side, I'd like juvenile delinquent, danger to society, all of these stereotypes right here, right? So what happened then?
When I was
like, what was the defining moment for you? Like, when did it all change for you?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I went to prison 2 times. Once at 18 years old, looking at I think 2 or 3 years. Back then that was a long time, but 2-3 years, and I ended up doing 2 years on the sentence. Got out. I did 12 months of solitary confinement. I got released to the streets the first time, straight from solitary confinement. That's a crazy way to get released. But even then, I had a mindset of just like wanting to do better, wanting to not go back to prison. And that was like what I envisioned. I had plenty of time to think about it in solitary confinement. I knew I didn't want to come back. I just didn't have the tools, the resources, the community, or anything, because I was in solitary confinement that whole time. So I get out, and I try to do good. I try to do the right things, and it was just too hard. I was filling out application after application, not getting any responses. I still had to pay bills. I remember one of my girlfriends at the time. I couldn't even afford to take her out to dinner. That was like a pride blow. I was like, something has to change. So I went back to doing what I knew. And then I was 21 years old, looking at a 36-year prison sentence, and that's when things really changed for me. When I was that's when I knew that I wasn't playing with the little leagues anymore. This was the big leagues. I was looking at some huge numbers. 21-year-old looking at 36. I was already doing the math. I'm like, I'm gonna be 50 when I get out. So I just like, yeah, no, something has to change. If I ever get another chance at life, I'm going to make the best of it.
So here you are. So what was going on? So I just wanted to pause for a break. But when we come back, really help understand this mindset that needs to change, that has changed, right? It's one thing I need to do better. I get it. But the man that I met in 2018, right? That was 8 years after you started serving that sentence, right? So you were 31 years old at the time, right? And during that time, something happened. So let's talk through that when we come back.
For sure.
All right. And we're back.
Okay, so yeah, bringing us back to that time, and just like how things have changed over the years. I think it's just a combination of things, but it wasn't an easy path. I wish I could say like, oh yeah, like I did have that vision or intent going into the prison sentence, like, hey, like I really messed up, things have to change. But it was a lot hard. It's easier to say that, like to say that things are going to change, but it's a lot harder to actually do it, right? Because you have to live it every single day. And one of the biggest challenges that I had to face was, going into a prison sentence with a gang background. There's a lot of expectations and politics that go into it. And at that time, I thought, I had to stay in because that's what I knew. That was my family. I wasn't going to turn my back on them or anything. I was loyal to my gang.
So what happened? How did you get out of the gang life? And how did you become the man I met in 2018?
Yes, I knew something had to change. I didn't know any skills. I didn't, like, before prison, I never had any professional job or experience. So I had to build skills. I had to find out how to become, useful. So I took any classes that I thought would help, better myself, whether it was like Alcoholics Anonymous, it could have been a straight A guide, Defy Ventures, like the program that I took with you. I took a coding program while I was in there. Didn't know any coding before I went to prison, came out a software engineer. But none of this would have been possible if I didn't, engage in those programs and try to think of something that was new that I didn't know about. I didn't know about, college or like getting credits or anything like that. But I knew at the end of the day, it was going to make me a better person than I was yesterday. So I knew that I seen the benefit of taking the classes. So it became more of like a lifestyle, right? Just like, all right, any class that I think is going to benefit me, sign up for it. Same thing.
Was there a moment when that happened for you, or was there a mentor, or what was that? Was there a specific moment, or was it just a gradual realization?
No, I think mentors had a huge influence.
Talk to us about some of your mentors. You might want to mention them by name because I'm sure they might be listening.
Yeah, my first mentor, I don't even know if they would call themselves mentors, but looking back at it, they were definitely mentors. And he was my cellie. He was Jason Davis. He was just coming back from serving a federal sentence. He was going back to get resentenced, I believe. And it was such an amazing, I just got so fortunate to have him as a cellie, as somebody that I was residing with when I first entered the county jail looking at this big sentence, because he already had years of experience inside the system from a federal perspective. And he offered a lot of insights onto just how to navigate a prison sentence, like what you should be doing with your time during your incarceration. So he just sprinkled me with good books and just always had me working out. Like he was always trying to instill that in me at the beginning, and he led by example. Like he was always reading books. He was always, trying to better himself. So I was just like, okay, like I want to be like him. I want to try to learn from him, because I didn't know how to approach prison. I was still brand new, trying to look at this long sentence and how do I even, approach it differently than I did the last time.
So you were fortunate enough to meet your Sally, who was already on a path of acceleration. And from that, you were able to have a role model for the first time in your life of that acceleration.
For sure.
Who else?
Jerry Duran, he's the other big one. He's getting out on clemency, actually, I think this month. So stay tuned for Jerry Duran. But this man has influenced my life in so many ways. He was a gang leader at the time of the prison facility. They used to call him Crow. But he really led by example. A little short Mexican guy, really feared, within his community and respected. But he just had a vision for me right when I got there. I told him my story. I was just like, look, like this is my second time in prison. I want to focus on, education and bettering myself. He's like, a lot of young guys don't come at me with that vision. He's like, I really respect that. And he's like, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you stay out of the way.
Wow. So that, for those who don't know the gang culture, right? It's easy to get into. It's very hard to get out.
For sure.
And I could see tears in your eyes, because I could see that this is incredibly emotional.
It is.
For you. So because he gave you a way out. He gave you a ticket.
For sure.
Can you talk more about that? Because that is so big.
It is. Yeah, I mean, essentially, so the politics, you just never know when you're going to have to, when anything's going to pop off, especially when you're in gangs. You could be building, you could be taking all of these classes, but it could go in a blink of an eye if something, within your gang happens. For him to give me just kind of like that pass to say, hey, focus on your education. We're going to let everybody else, worry about this other stuff. That was huge. If it wasn't for that opportunity, I'm going to have to be looking over my shoulder every day. I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation, but it was only because of that individual. If it wasn't for him saying that, I would have been on a completely different path. So
you came out, and you came to him. You had the guts to come to him and say, listen, this is what I want. And he says, most men don't come to me with this. I think the lesson here that I hear is that the first step to defying the odds is making a choice to defy the odds, and then to go seek out the right mentors and champions.
For sure.
Right. In order, mentors, they teach you, champions advocate for you. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're not. He clearly was both. And he definitely was a champion, right? He wasn't, and he gave you an opportunity, an opening.
For sure.
And so those who just try to muscle it out themselves, they miss the opportunity, because it's not a shortcut. It's not a hack. It is a requirement.
For sure.
To find mentors. It is one of those truisms that if you are in trouble, you taught me this one time, right? If you have a problem and you can't find a solution in 15 minutes, you're not talking to the right people.
Right.
Right. So go fast forward. Who else?
No, I do want to spend some time real quick on Jerry, because I do think he had a huge influence. And I think the other part of that was, now that I had this past, like, okay, how do I make the best of my circumstance? How do I get involved with the right people? Because it rang true. My dad's words came, back 7 years, 8 years down the road, of just like who you hang out with is who you're essentially going to become, right? So even though I felt myself, so involved in, the gang culture inside of the prison facility, there were still people that, wanted to do good. Even they're in my situation, they had a gang background, but they also wanted to stay out of prison and be successful. So they knew that they had to, take classes and they had to better themselves. So I try to look for individuals within like my specific gang that thought like me, that, I wanted to be around those types of individuals. And I think that's what really helped me, as we say in F3, iron sharpens iron, is, those were the individuals that helped sharpen me during those moments.
So it sounds like you found your whetstone in Jerry, whetstone again, blade sharpening you. But you also found a shield lock, a group of men who were on the same path as you are. And even though you were in this very toxic environment overall, you were able to create an environment, right?
For
and
sure.
That's something to really think through, because when you're thinking about it, your situation may not be as dire, right? You might not be in prison, dealing with a gang and trying, but it's the mechanics are the same. You must have a mentor, and you must have a shield lock, a group of men or women to lock shield with to succeed,
Right.
to protect yourself from all of the other arrows. Otherwise, you're vulnerable to anything that can happen, right?
Right.
And that's what we see all the time when there's a recidivism. A person's they were doing good, and then they misstep. They do one misstep, and then it just crashes down, and they lose everything.
Right.
So, okay. So, anyone else that you want to mention?
I'd probably say Jonathan Mira. You've met him as well. He's more so of like one of my best friends, I always tell him, but he was an incredible individual to be able to learn from. He just taught me so much that like I didn't know throughout my experience. And I met him, at the very beginning of my sentence, and we're able to maintain our relationship throughout. But just seeing how he approached, his prison sentence, and he was already, I think, 10 years into his prison sentence at that time. So I was able to learn a lot from him and just, see how he moved to kind of continue to sharpen myself.
So that's really an interesting point. Just a side note for those who are listening, when I started the CEO of Your New Life from Defy Ventures in 2018, out of those men that came through the door, there were 3 that were kind of like, they were a shield lock, right? There were 2 victors, right? And Jonathan. And it was fascinating because they held each other accountable. You held each other accountable. You made sure that the 3 of you succeeded. You also made sure that other people in the class succeeded. But now I'm also thinking through, and then by circumstances, both you and Jonathan left the prison, were released. And the other victor was left behind, right? And I think he's finally getting his footing back. But you and I both know he couldn't last.
Right.
He lost his footing. He started doing drugs. He started losing his vision, and because he lost his shield lock and he didn't find another one.
Right.
So you went to what he knew best. So when you're finding that yourself in that place of slipping down into the old place, you got to not. It's not about perseverance, and it's not about grit. It's about finding the other shield lock, people to help you. So
that's a good call out.
Yeah, it is a really good thought, and it's a warning sign, because I saw both you and the other victor. You guys were on the same path, and here you are, and here he is. There is a reason for that. So fast forward. Let's get moving to you getting out. You graduated Defy. You got released, right? What's going on for you then?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, 2019 October, I remember 21st. I remember that day quite clearly. I got released after serving this 10-year sentence. One of the first, big differences was community. I had Leo and, some folks from the Defy program at the time right there. They're champion for me. They're there. We went out for dinner the first day, and just that alone, that was just like epic. That took it to a whole nother level. That's why I was like, I actually have a community behind me. I could succeed. I started believing in myself. Like it was real. And I just really appreciated that support, especially in those, formative, days of getting out. But one of the things that came about the Defy Ventures program was actually my first job, getting released. I worked at Mod Pizza with a connection that we made through the Defy Ventures program. And it was pretty much a layup. Like all I had to do, I think, was call Liz at the time, and she's like, you're going to be working here in the next week or so. And just like that, I was working, even though this wasn't my dream job or anything like that. I knew that it was going to be a stepping stone for me to get me where I needed to go. I knew it wasn't going to be anything permanent. Wasn't something that, ideally I wanted from my first job, but I'm really thankful that I took the opportunity. And then after that, I had champions. Leo was, there. He's one of my biggest advocates, telling everyone, hey, this guy's a software engineer. He just got out of prison. He needs a job. Like, where's his job at?
Who you got? Who
Exactly,
do you got? Right.
Exactly.
And I remember during a workout, we had, we want to call out Judd Murphy, aka Cold War. I was running with him and I'm like, listen, I got a guy. It needs, and he met him, right? I brought one of the first things I did is I brought you into a community of winners. It is so critical. Now I'm getting emotional. It is so critical to give people the community of winners, and that is not what is being done. That is not the process that is being done. And I was able to do it for Victor. I wasn't able to do it for everyone, and not everyone took the opportunities that I've given, right?
Right.
But the idea is like you took them and you didn't disappoint. But yeah, if it wasn't for champions, you wouldn't have been on the path that you are. Period. No matter how strong you are as a person. So you got the second job with my help and Judd Murphy. And what was the job? And then what fast forward for us?
For sure. So I was with Murphy and Associates as an internship for about 6 months, running an email marketing campaign. I just finished up a coding boot camp. Didn't know if it necessarily correlated with the role, but I figured it was going to be a good way to get my foot in the door and just give me some more experience. I didn't have any experience on my belt, so I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity. So it was a really great fit at the time. Really thankful that Judd was able to believe in me, and give me the opportunity. Stayed with the internship for about 5 months, learned a ton, learned a lot more so from the recruiting side of things. So I thought that was really good insights for me to get early on in my career, just to kind of help me now
see what
exactly,
because the company recruited people like you
exactly
into the roles that were needed,
right?
And so you're like, oh, I could see how I fit into this
exactly
equation.
So I started believing it more, and I seen everyone's career trajectories over the resumes and stuff like that. Anyhow, so I go through this internship for about 6 months, and I remember it was just 5 months before, or 5 months into the internship, Troy from Unloop, he reaches out to me. He's like, hey, I got this fellowship opportunity for you at Code for America. And I seen how many people applied for the role. I was like, yeah, I think it was the last day to apply as well. So I'm just like, I'm going to put it in, but my shots are very slim. So I put it in. I end up getting a call back, get an interview, get accepted into the fellowship role. Here I was, not even a year out of release, and going into this fellowship as a software engineer. We're developing a resource application for formerly incarcerated individuals in California. And I was like, man, there couldn't have been a better job, a better fit.
Talk about full circle, right?
Exactly. So now I wasn't only able to continue developing my skills, but I was able to give back to the people that were coming behind me. That was just huge. I was like, this is where I need to be. It felt so perfect. If there's ever a perfect, description for a job, that was it.
So, but again, you couldn't. There are themes here, lessons here throughout. And I hope you all are hearing it, because that wouldn't have been possible without Troy.
Exactly.
It is through people that one can get ahead. Through, as in not using them, but leveraging the network that one's have. But Troy would not have gone out of his way to recommend you for that place. I would not have gone out of my way to recommend you for this job. And Jerry would not have gone out of his way to give you a path forward while you were incarcerated if you didn't show up. So you showed up, and then other men, in this case, stepped up and gave you a chance. But I see this again and again in my coaching and in my teaching. I see this as a pattern. That's why my kind of mantra, right, that all my students know. If you ever meet someone who says it, you can immediately probably ask them, hey, so was Leo your teacher? So your network is your net worth.
For sure.
And who you hang around with and who is willing to step up for you is how I count my my wealth, right? And so you gave to us so we can then give forward. Now you're giving forward. So now talk to us where you are now and what are we doing here?
For sure. I'll try to give a quick version of it. So after the fellowship program, Code for America ended up reaching back out to me, I think 4 or 5 months later, asked if I wanted to be a solutions engineer. I made that much of an impact on the organization where I didn't have to get interviewed or anything. They just said, like, we want you back. And I, of course, took it on. During that time, I also started Victory Code, which is a tech consulting company that I'm sure a lot of the listeners are familiar with, to support formerly incarcerated to get into tech. I've seen the experience that, or the impact that tech has had on my life, and I want to continue to pay that forward to other individuals that are releasing as well.
And it's a business. It's a for-profit business. Yeah. It's your own startup. And yeah. By the way, unbeknownst to you, but I was looking through my files just recently, and I have your business plan.
Okay.
From 2018.
Okay.
And I looked at it, and you are on your path.
Let's go. Yeah, that's awesome. It'd be good to look at.
Yeah, I'll send you all your documents. Yeah, because it'll totally blow your mind.
Yeah, so I started Victory Code. That was a whole experience, getting to apply a lot of the stuff that I learned from Defy Ventures and all the other individuals over the years to actually apply it in person. I'm doing okay with it. I got just graduated my 5th cohort of coding boot camp, starting the 6th one next month. So yeah, super excited for 2025. But a lot has happened outside of that in my personal life. I've had 2 kids. My oldest is Selah. She's 2 years old, and Swade, he's about 4 months, and that's been a whole experience in itself. But we ended up relocating to Texas, of all places, from Washington, just to start a new chapter in our lives and see what it's like. It's been really cool just to be able to experience this as like our new little family, and looking forward to what's to come. But yeah, just looking back, sitting in that prison cell, 5 years ago now, if you told me like, hey, could you envision this for yourself? I wouldn't have envisioned any of it. There's a lot of self-doubt, going into it, but that shows the importance of community, of people just being able to champion for you, and you continuing to show up. This is what happens.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So what are your top 2-3 obstacles that you are going to define now going forward?
I say the top 2 or 3 that come to mind. The first one I think is trying to find balance. One thing that I've learned is there's only 24 hours in the day. Especially as a business owner, trying to start, a podcast, trying to run, Victory Code, trying to work at, Code for America.
Trying to
raise 2 kids. Exactly. There's a lot of things going on. There's probably more responsibilities that I'm not listing, but it shows that that you have to have balance within everything, or else it could destroy you as well if you don't let it, or if you let it take control over. So that's one of the first lessons. And then the second is just be willing to learn. One thing that I've learned about, just this reentry journey is I'm not going to have, the answers, but I do have to be, have at least a willingness to want to explore something new. Because this whole reentry thing has been completely new to me. Like, this is a whole completely different lifestyle. If you would have looked at me before prison and now, like, I'm not the same individual. So a lot of this stuff is new, and I'm experiencing it for the first time, and just kind of having fun with it. But you do have to have a mindset of just like, you're not going to know everything. Go out there and
learn. It's a beginner's mind. It's learner's mind, right? It's not fixed mindset. It's growth mindset, as they call it.
Right.
And I think let's give another shout out for an organization that has, I know, helped transform you, and now you're helping to lead, and that is F3. So one of the first things I did, the first week you were out, I got you, uh, uh, I got you out
Right.
into the gloom and to work out. And so talk about that, and fast forward, whatever, 5 years now.
Right. So Leo, he was telling me about F3 while we are incarcerated, and I didn't know what to think of it at the time. But I was just, he kept bugging me. He kept bugging me. Hey, get out to your workout. And we ended up going to a workout in Kirkland, wee hours in the morning. I remember I couldn't sleep that night, but I showed up. I showed up because I know that like it meant a lot to him, and I wanted to hold myself accountable to get back out there. But yeah, after experiencing it, I was like, this is something I definitely needed. I think one of the biggest things for me was, we keep touching on this, is the importance of, mentors, of being able to learn from people. All I had to learn from growing up was, gang members and, people that were on drugs, and those weren't good role models for me. So I can't, say how important it was for me, for Leo to bring me out, and show me what a community of good role models looks like. I was able to learn, so much from them over the years, and still continue to learn when, I'm going through, this whole 2 new kids situation. Like, I don't know how to be a dad, but I could lean on, these individuals to share their experiences with me and continue to sharpen me. So I'm just really grateful for it, but I've also learned how to contribute to the organization.
So talk about that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, like what I've learned over the years in prison, is, I don't want to be the problem, right? I've spent so many years being a problem to society, always trying to, cause trouble, always being, just that person that causes the problem. Instead, I wanted to shift my vision and be a part of the solution. So what does that look like? How do you be a part of the solution? For me, it just meant stepping up in those moments when nobody else would. So F3, they encourage, free to lead mentality. Like everybody should, be encouraged to lead whatever they wanted to lead. And I just felt like I drew off of that. I was like, I really want to lead. I really want to, give back to my community. How do I do that? This was a perfect platform for me to give back. And any chance that I got, I was like, how could I give back to these men? Because, they're doing so much for everyone else.
And I think it is an interesting thing to reflect, that you started your journey in a gang, and you finish your right now you end up in a gang.
Right.
F3 is
a
a group
it's a positive
of men.
gang.
It's a positive gang, right?
Exactly.
It's a group of,
you get a nickname and everything.
Yeah, you get exactly, you get a nickname and everything. And the idea is it's you can go to another city. I go to Chicago and or North Carolina or Florida. I just look up the next F3 group close by, and I literally run up to them and I'm like, hey, I'm Pure Lead from Seattle. That's it. That's it. It's kind of like, if you were like, hey, exactly, I'm from this gang and I'm right. But talk about the difference of content, right? And so we do need gangs. That one of the key elements here about defying the odds is we do need gangs, groups of people who are united by common cause, but we need healthy ones. We need good ones. And so F3 is just one of those organizations. There's so many others. Toastmasters is another. Rotary is another that I've been part of. But we'll talk about that when you interview me. But that is the essence here. The lesson is, don't do it alone, right? They say if you want to go fast, do it yourself. If you want to do it well, find others. And I think let's finish up with that. Any last words for as a co-anchor of this podcast? What are your thoughts, ideas, and last words to the audience?
I just love our title of Defying the Odds, because it is really both a testament to like what the both of us have been through. But it also is just like a motivation for me, is learning these stories from everyone else is just like you have to continue showing up. Defying the odds isn't just a one-time thing. We're going to have to continue to go through this process and defy the odds. And I just love that mindset. And I want the learners to kind of, or the listeners rather, to kind of just kind of harp on this and think about everything that's being shared, and just the stories, but most importantly, like where you started from isn't where you're necessarily going to end up, right?
You're not defined by your past.
Exactly. So that's like one of the biggest things. I've went through a lot. I hope you learn through what I've shared. Obviously there's more, but someone's always got it worse than you at the end of the day. Someone's always got a deeper story than you. Somebody's always going to defy the odds more ways or another than you, but at the end of the day, you have to continue showing up and defy your own odds.
Yeah, let's finish on that, man.
All right, let's go.
Let's go.
Boom.
Boom.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Defying the Odds.
We hope you found inspiration, insight, and maybe a new way of looking at the challenges in your own life.
Remember, defying the odds is a mindset, and you have what it takes to overcome anything.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe.
Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay resilient, and never stop defying the odds.